When boundaries change, what do? You want to respect your partner's boundaries or your friend's boundaries, but what if a year and a half later, after you've been really carefully walking around it, they say, "Oh, that changed a long time ago. Didn't you know that?" What if they don't tell you that they changed? This is Reid Mahalko from ReidAboutSex.com.
This is Cathy from the IntimacyDojo.com. So they're reporting that they have a boundary. Can you give me an example? Create an example. Pull an example out of your butt.
Thank you. Okay, so your friend says, I never want you to touch me when we're sitting in a movie theater.
Okay.
And you're like, you guys go to the movies all the time, and you're trying to be really careful of like never touching them in the movie theater. And it's just a silly example, but then like a year and a half later, you bump them, and you're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to touch you." And you're like, "What? I don't understand." And like, you don't like to be touched in a movie theater. And you're like, "Oh, no, that was just a thing that happened. That's not been a case for a long time."
Okay.
It's like you put a lot of effort into respecting their boundary, and you didn't want to like push on it. But
Okay.
how do you handle that?
I'd be like, awesome.
Wow. Okay.
Why? I mean, do you want to take it personally or something? You want to be? I mean, do you need acknowledgement for putting a lot of effort into something? Like what? Like.
Well, I think that if you're I tend to be very conscious of people's boundaries, and I can understand the frustration of having carefully walked around a boundary you thought existed.
Sure. Like a landmine, and then all of a sudden you realize that there are no landmines there.
And they never told you.
Okay.
So, you just say, okay.
Well, I mean,
what if you had done that? You'd very carefully walked around this person, put effort into being gentle with them around it, and then found out that it wasn't a thing for them anymore, but they hadn't told you.
I'd probably just ask for acknowledgement.
So can you give an example? Just use the words for...
yeah. Like, so, okay. Well, I wish you'd told me, a year ago that was
I thought you knew. I mean, couldn't you tell?
No, I couldn't tell. But I'd like to be acknowledged for trying not to walk on your landmines. Would you acknowledge me?
I acknowledge you for not walking on my landmines.
Thank you.
So for me, it would make me wonder, like, acknowledgement is good, asking for acknowledgement, but it would make me wonder what of the other boundaries they might have shifted and you don't know. Like if you're, like,
so you could ask them. So Cathy, are there any other boundaries that have shifted in the last year that you haven't told me about?
No, none.
Are you sure?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
But maybe not. Like.
Okay, but that's like life. That's like humans. How many times have you, YouTube viewers, said something declarative in a moment, and then a week or a year later it wasn't true for you anymore?
I think most people have done that.
Okay, and how many of you, when that shifted for you, sprang out of bed to tell the person that you told they should never do that changed for you?
Most of us don't, but
Why?
It can be frustrating when you spend a lot of energy trying to, especially if they emphatically laid down a boundary. And
I know. It is frustrating hanging out with humans, which is why most people get dogs or cats. If you really want to not be, put out by a pet, like reptiles tend to just sit there on a hot rock and, but they don't lick your face in the same way.
All right. Well, I
You're stuck on the lizard. So.
Yeah, licking your face. Just. I find it frustrating. I've had a couple friends do that to me, and I found it very frustrating. So,
how did you handle the frustration?
I wondered about their boundaries, but I tried to be very consent oriented. So if they've stated a boundary. It's just kind of, there's some sadness because I might have not done something that I really enjoy, and they're like, "Oh no, that changed a long time ago." And you're like,
and when you've done that to people, how did you handle it? Because you said you didn't spring out of bed and then call up everybody that you said that was a boundary for.
One, I may not have noticed if I'd done that with somebody, but I tend to be pretty communicative overall, and look for ways to connect. So I tried, if boundary is no longer there, I think over time I would tell them. I don't spring out of bed, but...
Okay. So So over time, you would tell them, but then they waited for 6 months before you told them.
It's possible.
So how do you handle that?
I guess it just is, but it's very frustrating.
How do you handle frustration? Now we're getting to the questions.
Yeah, there are lots of different ways to handle frustrations. Burying the person in the backyard, not a good choice. They
not
put
alive.
Police. Yeah. But sharing and asking, trying to talk about things. If it's, I mean, some people have set boundaries very firmly. They don't want to even talk about it, and then we need to steer away from that. But otherwise, just kind of check. Is it okay to check in? You set this boundary, and I would really love to do that. Are you open to discussing it?
You could do a State of the Union, you know, kind of like once a year, get together with those people that are important with you and be like, okay, we're checking in. Any boundaries shifted? Here are the things that I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you with. Because this is what part of this is usually it's a thing that's about fitting, like a good fit versus a bad fit, kind of a date your species thing. And we're getting long on this, so maybe we'll jump to another video. So the idea is those when you're walking on eggshells versus when you're not walking on eggshells. Mm-hmm. To me, in my geekery, that's a fit. Like a good fit are people where you just are a good fit, and there's no eggshells to walk on.
Yeah.
And then when there's landmines, then it's usually that's more of less of a good fit neighborhood, mm-hmm. because then there's things like people have triggers. Or like I'm, not me personally, but like I have a fear of dogs or something like that, mm-hmm. right? Like something really bad happened to me when I was a kid. You have a dog. Now, we have to do the extra work for you to make sure your dog is downstairs in its pen. When I come over, like there's extra effort. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like things where it's just a bad fit and everyone's kind of you're touchy-feely and the other person's not. Movie, theater analogy, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to know what you think. Leave comments below.
We'll do another video.
Thanks for tuning in, Sex Geek. If you would like to continue with the brain sex, do me a favor and click subscribe right here. If you'd like to watch me on social media, that's where you're going to go. Next video, maybe? And if you really would like your own Sex Geek t-shirt, please click right here. Right now. Boop. No, really, like